Hello, my name is William Darrell Fitch, and this is my intercommunication project for Liberty University, Class HSER 508. In order to make it easier, in order to move to the next slide, I'll just say next slide. First slide, please. Communication is a continuous, complex, collaborative process of verbal and nonverbal meaning making. There are 6 features of communication. They are meaning, choice, culture, identities, conversation, and nexting. Interpersonal communication is a subset of this process. Next slide, please. My overarching goal for this project is to become more of an empathetic listener. 2, to reduce my tendency to stereotype. Next slide, please. 3, to ensure that my self-disclosure is appropriate. And 4, to make the choice to communicate in a way that my moral and ethical standards may be communicated effectively. Next slide, please. The DISC Personality Type and Blend. That is a personality test that specifies 4 different temperament styles. Each individual has a different personality type and blend. The 4 different temperaments are D, which are active, task-oriented, I, which is active, people-oriented, S, which is passive, people-oriented, and C, passive, task-oriented. Next slide, please. The DISC test can be taken at uniquelyu.com, and I recommend that if you have the opportunity to take the test that you find out your own personal personality type and blend. Next slide, please. My personality type and blend are expected of me, SD, and this is me, CSD. What does this mean? It means that what's expected of me is to be both dominant and submissive. People expect me to have drive and determination. They also expect me to be a dreamer and a hard worker and to persevere through situations. CSD means that people expect me to be direct, submissive, and competent. I tend to be passive at times, but people are surprised at my dominant side. Next slide, please. My conversational influences of my blend are both positive and negative. On the positive side, I can be outwardly confident, cordial, and kind. But on the negative side, I can be over-analytical and prepare, and also over-dominant and competent. Sometimes they say I'm stubborn and defiant also. Next slide, please. My personal barriers to communication. As I have discovered, I have a few barriers to my own personal communication style. First would be perception, reception, and attention. Listening is a selective process, and it can also be subjective. If I do not pay attention, I can select not to listen to things and tune things out, or I can select to hear things that are not really there. Next, bias listening. We form opinions on our own about several different things, and because of our biases, it can cause us to listen effectively or ineffectively. Next, the effects of my emotions on my listening. When I'm emotionally distraught, it can cause me not to hear things. But when I am in a balanced emotional state, I hear better. So that is definitely a piece that I need to focus on. Next, noise pollution. Noise pollution can both be internal and external. The internal noise pollution comes on from things that are in my mind. Those are things that I hear within my head, whether it be emotional, whether it be stress, or those types of things can keep me from hearing properly. Next, external noise pollution. Those things are the things that are around you that can distract you. They can be either cars driving by, it can be distractions by people walking by, or from hearing loud sounds. All these things can be noise pollution. Next slide, please. Some of my internal noise pollutions and the way I can solve those things are stress, working on reducing stressful situations. I can take time out to relax. Next, my emotional concerns. I can evaluate whether the concerns are real or whether they're imaginary. Or I can speak to someone about the concerns that I have once I found out they are real in order to try to alleviate those things. Next, physical ailments. If I'm sick, I need to seek medical attention. and not just hold on to, trying to stay away from a doctor and just keep on moving on and not listening properly because I'm so focused on my health when I should get those things resolved so that they won't be a hindrance to me hearing and listening properly. External noise pollution and the way those things can be solved. Loud music, turn off music, or find another place to have a conversation. Next, my environment. I can either close windows, close shutters, or I can move to a less distracting area. Next, tone of the individual. If the person's too loud, I can just ask them to tone it down a little bit. If they are too soft, I can ask them to raise their voice so I can hear them better. All these things are ways in which the noise pollution can be solved. Next slide, please. Achieving better communication is my goal. And in achieving those things, these are my overarching goals and how I look to resolve those. One, of becoming a more empathetic listener. Focusing. That is a key factor. And the way I do that is by keeping appropriate contact with the speaker, paying more attention to their nonverbal communication cues, and mirroring the speaker's posture. Next, I can encourage them by asking more questions, also focusing on nonverbal movements to show them that I am paying attention to the conversation. Next, reflecting. Reflecting is a way of paraphrasing the conversation with the speaker so that they know that you're really engaged and you have heard what they've said. Next thing is by using my talker listener cards, as Dr. Peterson stated. The talker listener cards are something that I've used in phone conversations to make sure that I'm having an appropriate conversation and that I am hearing and listening appropriately. Next slide, please. Next is reducing stereotyping. Stereotyping is something that we all do. And in order to stop the stereotyping, well, more or less the negative stereotyping, is one, admit that I have prejudices and commit to reducing them. Next, I need to identify the stereotypes that reflect prejudices and modify them. If it's a negative stereotype, I definitely need to modify or remove it. If it's a positive stereotype, I can bolster it so that it becomes more of who I am, that I can use those things in order to have positive images of people. Next, identify the actions that reflect the prejudices and modify them. Same with that. If I have negative stereotypes, I need to remove them. I need to remove the actions that are causing those negative stereotypes to be and prejudices to be encouraged in my life, and then modify the ones that are positive in order to bolster them. Lastly, seek feedback from some individuals that are in a diverse group of my friends and or colleagues. That way I can have a better conversation with individuals and be more respectful and valuing of diversity. Next slide, please. Appropriate self-disclosure. I need to make sure that my self-disclosures are appropriate. I need to make sure that I discern well on what I should be sharing. Ensure that I do not share information that is not relevant to our conversation. And make sure that it is appropriate to the audience that I am speaking to. Lastly, communicate ethical and moral standards more effectively. I need to be sure that I know what I believe. And in sharing what I believe, I need to understand the position of the person that I'm speaking with. Also, make sure that in sharing that information with them that I'm not destroying or degrading the position that they're in. Because the best way to hinder a conversation going forth is to downplay the other person's position. If you don't downplay their position and you speak more effectively of your position, that way you can have a true dialogue. And lastly, understanding that just because someone else has a different position of mine, then that does not mean that what my position is that it's invalid. I need to fully understand it and be aware of that. In conclusion, through my understanding of my communication style and type and blend, I have received valuable information on how I communicate with others. This information has helped me to identify some flaws in my interpersonal communication skills. In uncovering these areas and through having open internal dialogues, I have created a plan that I can grow to become a better communicator. That being said, I think it'd be appropriate to end with this note. Dr. Stewart said that if genuine dialogue is to arise, everyone who takes part in it must bring himself into it. I thank you for your time. I hope this has been educational for you as it has been for me. And you have a blessed evening and day.